You wake up one morning and check the news. Another billionaire caught exploiting thousands while facing zero consequences. Another politician who lied his way into power. Another saint dying alone in poverty while monsters live in mansions. And you ask yourself the same question humans have asked for thousands of years. Why do the worst people win? Every religion has tried to answer this. They tell you it's a test. They tell you it's karma. They tell you God works in mysterious ways. They tell you the righteous will be rewarded in the next life. But none of it explains why a 3-year-old gets leukemia. None of it explains why serial killers die peacefully in their sleep while activists get assassinated. None of it makes the math work, unless the Gnostics were right, unless the being who created this world isn't good at all. What if the game is rigged because the game master is corrupt? What if this world rewards evil because it was designed by evil? Not Satan as a rebel, not a fallen angel, but the architect himself, the builder, the god of this world. This is the answer that got people killed, the answer that was buried for 1600 years, and it's the one answer that actually explains what you see when you look around honestly. Before we go further, you need to understand something. Not all Gnostics taught the same thing. The texts discovered at Nag Hammadi reveal a spectrum of belief, and some of it might surprise you. The Valentinian, followers of the teacher Valentinus in the 2nd century, didn't portray the demiurge as purely evil. To them, he was ignorant rather than malevolent, a cosmic child playing with forces he didn't understand, creating a flawed world not out of spite but out of blindness. They emphasize redemption, even for this misguided architect. Some texts even describe one of the Archons, Sabbath, witnessing the light of Sophia and experiencing a kind of awakening. He rebels against the demiurge's tyranny and is elevated to a higher realm as a reward. This reveals something important. Gnostic theodicy wasn't simple black and white dualism. It was a sophisticated attempt to explain why a cosmos containing both beauty and horror could exist, why goodness and evil seem woven into the very fabric of reality. The nuance matters because it shows these weren't just cynical pessimists rejecting the world. They were philosophers and mystics wrestling with the same question that haunts us today. If there's intelligence behind creation, why does it permit such profound suffering? Fast forward to the 20th century. A science fiction writer named Philip K. Dick begins experiencing vivid visions in 1974. He becomes convinced that we're living in what he calls the Black Iron Prison, a false reality constructed by malevolent forces. He fills thousands of pages in his personal journal, called the Exegesis, exploring Gnostic cosmology. Dick didn't know it then, but he was channeling ideas that had been suppressed for over a millennium. Then came 1999. The Wachowskis released The Matrix, and suddenly millions of people were being exposed to Gnostic symbolism, whether they knew it or not. The architect, the false creator of the Matrix. The agents, enforcers who keep humans trapped in illusion. Morpheus offering the choice between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truth. Neo discovering he's more than his programmed identity. These aren't just sci-fi concepts, they're Gnostic theology wearing a leather trench coat. But the parallels go deeper than Hollywood. Consider the simulation hypothesis, gaining traction in Silicon Valley. Philosophers and physicists seriously proposing that our reality might be a computer program created by advanced beings. Strip away the modern language and what do you have? Programmers as demiurgic entities. The laws of physics as archonic constraints. The search for a way out of the simulation. It's Gnosticism translated into code. Or look at Carl Jung's psychology. Jung studied Gnostic texts extensively and saw in them a map of the human psyche. The demiurge became the ego consciousness, cut off from the deeper self. The archons became shadow archetypes, autonomous complexes that control us from within. Gnosis became individuation, the process of awakening to your true nature beyond conditioned identity. Jung essentially secularized Gnostic cosmology and turned it into a therapeutic system. Even our conspiracy theories have a distinctly Gnostic structure. Hidden controllers manipulating reality, mass deception keeping people asleep, an awakened minority who see through the illusion. Whether it's the Illuminati, the Deep State, or any other shadowy cabal, the pattern repeats. A small group possesses secret knowledge, while the masses stumble through a carefully constructed false reality. Now, you might say these are just metaphors, useful fictions, psychological models, and perhaps they are. But here's where it gets interesting. What if the Gnostics were describing something real, just not in the literal way we imagine? The 20th century philosopher Simone Weil wrote about what she called the Great Beast, not a literal monster but the emergent force of collective systems, corporations, governments, institutions that take on a life of their own and crush individual souls beneath abstract goals. She described how these systems demand sacrifice, how they feed on human suffering, how they perpetuate themselves regardless of the damage they cause. Read her descriptions and tell me she isn't describing the Archons in modern language. Systems that reward psychopathy, that elevate the ruthless and punish the compassionate, that create meaning through hierarchy and domination, that convince us our worth is measured by productivity, by status, by how well we serve the machine. The world didn't become less Gnostic after the texts were buried. If anything, it became more so. And then there's the problem of theodicy itself. Traditional answers to the question of evil have always felt insufficient. After the Holocaust, after the tsunami of 2004 that killed over 200,000 people in a matter of hours, after a global pandemic, theologians have started admitting what many have felt all along. The old explanations don't work anymore. Some, like philosopher David Bentley Hart, have rejected classical theodicy entirely, calling it morally obscene to justify such suffering. But what do you replace it with? How do you maintain faith in a good God while looking at the world honestly? The Gnostics offered a radical alternative. What if you don't maintain that faith? What if you declare the emperor has no clothes? What if you say out loud what part of you has always suspected? That this world isn't supposed to be this way, that something is fundamentally wrong at the architectural level, that you're not broken or sinful for feeling that wrongness in your bones. This is why the idea won't die. Because it names something we recognize. It gives voice to a suspicion that lives beneath the surface of every honest person's mind. The suspicion that we're living in a reality designed by something that doesn't have our best interests at heart. Whether you interpret that something as a literal cosmic entity, as emergent systemic evil, as the blind mechanism of evolution, or as the human ego projected onto the cosmos, the structure remains the same. We find ourselves in a world that seems rigged against wisdom, compassion, and truth. The Gnostic answer remains shocking even now. The world is ruled by evil because evil made it, not Satan as a rebel angel, the architect himself, the builder, the God of this world. For 2,000 years, we've been told to accept suffering as mysterious but meaningful, as punishment we deserve, as character building, as part of a plan too vast for us to comprehend. We've been told to bow our heads and have faith that it all makes sense from a higher perspective. The Gnostics said something else. They said, you have permission to call it what it is, a prison, a trap, a cosmic crime scene. And the first step toward freedom is recognizing you're not supposed to be here. The texts that were buried for 1,600 years are now freely available. You can read them yourself. The knowledge the church declared so dangerous it had to be completely eradicated is now a few clicks away. Which leaves you with a choice. You can accept the comfortable explanations, the ones that preserve the authority of institutions and the legitimacy of this world structure. Or you can ask the dangerous question, the one that got people burned as heretics, the question the Gnostics whispered in the desert before the empire silenced them. What if they were right? What if the first step to freedom really is recognizing you're in a prison? And what will you do with that knowledge once you have it?